Well, my name is Sydney. I'm the owner of SpeedLab, and then I will answer questions from the internet about tuning and car performance in general. So we'll start with some guy named STZ Isnan. Do I need to change wheels before getting a remap? I plan to get 20-inch wheels with 35-inch tires. Actually, it doesn't matter if you change wheels or not, because either way, it's what we call in the industry unsprung weight. It's not part of the total weight of the car. What do I mean by that? Your car's weight is taken. Let's say this is your car. This is this is the car. The wheels are here. Unsprung means that the springs are fully extended. So this is what matters. And then the wheels are basically this one. The easiest explanation is the reason why it doesn't matter is because when you remap or not, it's the power in the engine. So imagine that this is the car and this is you. Actually, the short answer is it doesn't matter whether you change wheels before or after you remap because, well, imagine this is your car. You have standard wheels here. When you remap, you change the power of the engine and then that power goes to the transmission, goes to the wheels here. When you change to bigger wheels and tires, what happens is you take your car, you add weight to it. So it gets heavier no matter what you do. So if you, for most of the people out there who actually have done this, you do the whole gamut off-road setup. You put bumpers, snorkel, roof rack, big wheels, big tires, and then you feel the weight and it's heavier. So that's why you want a remap to compensate for that additional weight. And then you feel it getting slower. So same thing, if you remap first and then you do all your off-road setup, it's still the same. You just have more power, but you just added more weight. So you'll still feel getting slower. So the only difference is your perception of stock and then slow and then power again versus stock, remap, and then back to this one because you put off-road stuff on it. So again, we're thinking about the power of the engine here. That doesn't change. It's still, if well, on our dyno pack, if it's 160 wheel horsepower, it's 160 wheel horsepower because on our dyno we take off the wheels. We take off one big variable. On other dynos like the DynoJet roller dyno, if you change from stock wheels to big wheels, the reading will actually change. So, but you have the weight of the wheels to take into account. But again, if you're just taking the power in the engine, no, that does not change. So changing wheels doesn't matter before or after remap. Hef Sulaiman says, does ECU remap need any kind of maintenance? Does it disappear when you unplug the battery? No, it doesn't require any kind of maintenance. No, it doesn't disappear when you unplug the battery. That particular last question comes from the fact that back in the 90s, you have a car stereo. You meticulously tune all the settings, your equalizer, left, right balance, and all that stuff. And then when you unplug the battery, all the settings go away. That doesn't happen anymore though because every car radio now has an internal battery. The same way that your ECU actually has an internal battery also. So no, the settings do not just magically disappear. The same way that when you have a USB drive, when you unplug it, there's no power, it doesn't disappear. The data still stays here. That's why it's called remap or reflash because your ECU is treated as a flash drive. So, same thing as your phone. You have memory here, you have flash memory, you have battery. I'll turn the phone off now. And when I turn it on again, all my pictures, all my messages are still here. Same thing with the ECU remap. It don't magically vanish into thin air. RD Morales asks, what header is the best, 4.1 or 4.2.1? I'm so confused. Yes, you're confused and so is everybody else. Here's the problem when you research this on the internet. You type 4.1 versus 4.2.1 header. Results come out in Google. You read the first 5, maybe up to page 2. The problem with every single one of you, you fail to read the context or even what website, what forum is being discussed about what car. And I'm telling you right now, the first 20 or actually the first 50 up to 100 or Everything else is all related to Honda. You try it now. You Google 4-1 versus 4-2-1 header and see what happens. What's going to come out is, let's try it now actually. So 4-1 versus 4-2-1. 4-2-1 versus 4-1 header. Result number 1, K20.org. It's a Honda site. Result number 2, Redline 360. It still pertains to Honda. More Honda. Honda Tech. Videos. Well, my video comes out. It's actually what I say why it's stupid also. Yep, it's all Honda. Even the images comes out, it's all a Honda header. So every single thing that you've been reading is about Honda, which does not pertain to you if you drive a Vios, you drive an Altis, you drive a Camaro. None of this is relevant to you. So don't bother going to the internet anymore because it doesn't work. And the best exhaust actually is the one that makes power. And how do we know it makes power? Well, for us in SpeedLab, what we do is we test various configurations. Most modern cars, by modern, I mean 2000 and up, the best configuration is a 4-1 short header because that's what the stock header is. So let me pull something up like this one. This one is for a Hyundai Elantra. So this is what we call a short header. It's short because it's relatively short. Most cars have this length of a header, from a Lancer to a Toyota to a Vios to an Almera. It's pretty much this length, so it's about 12 inches or so. The reason why we do this is because after this flange here, to make it a bolt-on so we don't cut anything, this is already the catalytic converter here. As much as possible, we try to make a header that removes the stock one and replace it with something better. But if you talk about something like, again, you're talking about the old Hondas, 1990 Hondas, or something like this one, things without a catalytic converter. This is a first generation Miata header. As you can see, it's long. It's longer than the Elantra header because number one, it doesn't have a catalytic converter, and then there's a lot more space underneath the car so that we can have a longer header design. So the rule of thumb is the longer that you can make the header, the more power you'll make. It doesn't matter if it's 4-1 or 4-2-1. Both designs will make power. Both designs will be a lot better than stock. There are some 4-2-1s that will make more power than 4-1. There are some 4s that will make more power than 4-2-1. It depends on how it's designed. So what do we mean by that? I can move this primary length here or here or here. But due to space restrictions, I can't move it here because this is already the chassis. So again, the header design is mostly dictated by, number one, packaging, and number two, where exactly does this end? Because this part here where the flange is, bolts onto the stock muffler. So you don't have a lot of flex, unless it's a all-out race car, then you can test any header configuration you want. But for majority of street cars, it is constrained by where you can put the pipes, how big you can put the pipes, and where you bend the pipes. So it's all about the packaging and the chassis. So again, don't 4-1 versus 4-2-1. No, it doesn't matter. Again, it's the header design that makes the most power. That's what you should be looking for. Makona Man 112 asks, why don't you upgrade injectors when tuning for more power? Is it bigger better? Well, that's a two-part answer. Let's start with gasoline cars. No, bigger is not always better because the injectors that you have in pretty much every gasoline car is over-spec'd for whatever horsepower the engine is going to make. And gasoline cars are normally run more rich in factory trim than needed. So let's say you have a 200cc injector. You have 4 of those. These things run at 60-70% duty cycle, meaning they're only at 60-70% maximum of their capacity. We can run them all the way up to 85-90%, but if anything beyond that is not recommended. But again, throwing more fuel into a gasoline car does not mean it makes more power. On the contrary, you have to lean it out a little bit for you to make power. So no, bigger is not better. For diesels, yes, a bigger injector will make more power. And then there are people who sell bigger injector upgrades for the Hilux or Mitsubishi Montero, D-Max. Pretty much every single diesel car now has an injector upgrade that somebody sells. So, because diesel is simple, you don't have a spark, you have air and fuel. You keep throwing more air, you keep throwing more fuel, and keep making more power. The downside is the more fuel you throw, well, you'll have higher combustion temperatures, higher EGR temperatures, and it'll be smoky. Once you throw in the big injector, there's really no way around it because if you really want power, that's the only way for the diesel to have power. So, and normally the stock injector of the diesel is good enough for additional 50, 60 horsepower. And for 99% of people, that amount is plenty. Jigsman asks, does Resonator make a difference in power? Can just remove it? The simple answer is no. A resonator or a silencer is just that. It's there to quiet down the exhaust. It has nothing to do with power production. It has nothing to do with exhaust flow. It has nothing to do with back pressure. Nothing. It just makes it more quiet. Okay, to be strict about it, yes, having a resonator will slow down the exhaust flow somewhat because that is the energy being dissipated. But it's not enough for you to rob you of significant horsepower. Again, this is all the assumption that the resonator and silencer you put is properly designed to begin with and is properly sized to begin with. Because we have people who ask that they change the muffler first. They're looking for a sound, and then they're kind of disappointed that when you change the muffler, it's still kind of quiet. So if they want more sound, can you just cut the mid silencer and put a straight pipe? Yes, you can. You'll have more sound, and there will be absolutely no change in power. I have no idea how to pronounce this guy's name. It's Ihurdela Desma. I have no idea how to pronounce this guy's name. But anyway, he asks, what's a dyno? What's a tune? What's a street tune? Well, it's three questions in one. All right, let's start with the first one. Dyno. It's actually short for dynamometer. It's the equipment that measures horsepower and torque, and air fuel ratio and boost on most models. So we have two of those things. We have a Dynapack, which is this one, and we have a roller dyno from Dynocom, which is this one. You can think of the dyno as a treadmill for the car. So on a treadmill, you can measure again your speed, and they can extrapolate pretty much how much calories you burn. It can give you resistance while you run. It can do incline. So again, it's a measure of performance. That's basically what a dyno is. It's a glorified treadmill for the car. And even though it's a glorified treadmill for the car, these things are not cheap. Our Dynapack right now, I think if we're gonna buy brand new, is 20 million. So serious piece of equipment that tuners need. The next one, what's a tune? For those of you who play the guitar, what do you do? What's the first thing you do when you actually get your new guitar? You play around with it. You do the tension. Sometimes you change the string. What you're doing is tuning. So basically, tuning is making adjustments to try to get the performance you want. It's the same thing with cars, but only the difference is it's not strings and it's not tension, it's numbers and it's math and it's air fuel ratio, it's chemistry and it's physics. So that's what tuning is. It is the act of making adjustments to get performance, whether it's through, well, right now, nowadays, it's all done through the computer. So that's pretty much it. Back in the old days, you tune the carburetor, you fiddle around with the jettings and the screws. So, and then you can actually adjust the distributor. That is tuning back in the old days. So for you young ones who can't remember that anymore, it's fine. That's gone the way of the dinosaur. And this other question is, what's a street tune? So basically, it's tuning on the street without a dyno. So because back in the old days went up by comparison. Well, late 90s, early 2000s, dynos were not that prevalent yet. So what most people did was, if they don't have access to one, is then they will bring their laptop to the car. You have a driver, you'll fiddle around, you'll tune it, then you tell the driver to step on it. From there, hopefully your driver is pretty good at trying to see to and be honest with you to know if the adjustment you did, is the car faster, is the car slower, do you hear any detonation, is the air fuel ratio correct? Well, you have a portable AF gauge, so that's basically what street tuning is. It is a very, very rough way of determining performance. Chances are there will be an increase in performance, but by how many horsepower, you actually have no idea. So again, same thing. Let's take the treadmill for example. unless you have a route mapped out that you know exactly. So okay, I can run 2 kilometers. My time is a minute and 30. So unless you have that route and you know yourself and you know how to get there, so that's your baseline performance. But you don't know how many calories you burn. Unlike doing it on a treadmill, you have exact reading for distance, you have exact reading for the resistance, calories, and all of that. So you have more data when you're on the treadmill than you're just on the street. So that's the easiest comparison. But right now, the gold standard is almost always you must have a dyno because, again, we're dealing with cars that, number one, are not ours. Number two, we don't know the history. Number three, we don't know who else did you go to before, because we have had some cars who came here and then they're, of course, they come here because they complain, oh, car lacks power, there's no pull, yada 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 yada. Like just this morning, we have a Range Rover Evoque. We strapped it on the dyno, and lo and behold, it made 40 horsepower. And that's why the guy was complaining. Because apparently it had a bunch of errors that didn't show up that didn't show up in a cheap OBD scanner. So we had to plug in our scanner and find out that there's a bunch of sensors that are not working. So after we cleared it, lo and behold, it went up from 40 to 160 horsepower. If you're gonna tune that card on the street without a dyno, you will never find out that it's that it's severely underpowered to begin with. So between street tuning and dyno tuning, of course you go for dyno tuning. It's not that much more expensive. Again, it's like trying to cure cancer without an MRI. Use Mahoder asks, isn't what you're doing voiding the car's warranty? Well, it only voids the car's warranty if you get caught, right? But in all seriousness, if you read every single manufacturer's warranty policy, any change in the car, you change your tint, you change your bumper, you change your wheels, those things already void the warranty of the car. But as practical experience tells us, that's not exactly how it's done. That's not exactly how they do it because well, there are some dealers who are real dicks and don't they do it to the letter. Any change voids the warranty. So okay, fine, don't go to that one. There are some dealers who are more understanding, especially if they work with car clubs directly. What comes to mind was Subaru before when they opened here in the Philippines about 15 years ago. They already understand that when people buy their cars, they don't stay stock for long. And if they want their business, they better be nice to the enthusiast community because if we're going to be a dick and be strict about the warranty, nobody will buy a Subaru. It's that simple. So, again, strictly speaking, if you're remapping a car, no, we're not voiding the warranty because we're not changing anything. Hardware wise, we're not changing anything. Software wise, we're not changing anything either. We're still using the same software. Same thing as a phone. You download an app. It's basically it's not as simple as that, but that's pretty much it. So downloading a bunch of apps will not void the warranty of your phone. But if your phone slows down because of too much garbage apps, that's your own fault. J. Lopez is telling me or asking me that what makes you think you know more than the manufacturer's engineers? Oh, I don't think I know. If we're talking about the Philippine context or pretty much any Asian context, here's the thing. If you're an engineer in Honda, Toyota, or wherever car company it is, you focus only on one thing, which is the task assigned to you. If you're in charge of designing a clutch or actually specking out the clutch, you don't even design it per se. You just have to, you don't design a clutch from scratch nowadays. You're given the spec. I need the clutch to handle 200 foot-pounds of torque, 150 horsepower. Ask our suppliers here what clutch fits the bill. There's no engineering being done anymore. Yes, surprised to hear that that's the case. That's pretty much the case now. The only real engineering done is even let's say you're building a totally new engine, you're building upon decades and decades of experience which you yourself have not experienced. So yes, and again, if you're in charge of doing the piston, that's all you know, doing the piston. Cooling system is not your concern. Air conditioning system is not your concern. Drivetrain is not your concern. You have knowledge about it, yes, but this is my job. I designed this. This is me. Everything else is like, okay, I know it is. But us who work in a car shop and a modification shop and a tuner shop, have to take a more holistic approach. You have to know all of the components, not just a single component. Again, we let it up to the engineers to decide. So again, engineer's job is thrown. You design a piston that can handle 300 horsepower and survive for the next 500,000 kilometers. So what he'll do is he'll overspec the piston. That's why we also know that every single engine in the world is overbuilt. You do not build a 100 horsepower engine that will break at 101 horsepower. That just doesn't happen anymore. So every engine is overbuilt by a factor of at least 2, which means that you can double the engine's horsepower and the thing will still survive. And most of it comes from, of course, experience not just by us but from other shops. So as we hear stories like, oh, this Subaru engine broke Ringland number 3 at 380 horsepower, at 400 horsepower. So we know that, okay, somebody did it, somebody reached the factory limit. Then that knowledge gets spread among us. So yes, in effect, we do know more than the manufacturer's engineers. And it's very simple. If you go to the SEMA show, you can talk to the guys who actually develop the aftermarket parts, and then you talk to the Ford engineers. Most of the time, most often than not, the Ford engineers will surprise. It can go up to that high. Yes, it can go up to that high. And what did you change? So nobody knows one single thing about it. But again, in our line of business, we are forced to know what the limits of the engine are, which you as the engineer in the design department will never get to see the light of day. Chengboy Kiat asks, which do I do first? Intake, remap, wheels, exhaust. Well, practically speaking, get wheels. That's the easiest thing to do because that's pretty much what everybody does when they buy a brand new car. They start shopping for wheels right away. So if your car comes with 15-inch wheels, if you're suddenly looking for 16, 17-inch wheels an hour after you buy it. So yes, do wheels first because it's the instant gratification upgrade. I don't mind because I personally find most OEM wheels ugly anyway. But as far as engine mods go, the rule of thumb is you do all the bolt-ons first. Anything that you can bolt on, which includes the intake and the exhaust. If there's camshaft available for the car, which nobody does anymore actually, or whatever, bolt everything on, you leave the tuning for last because you can actually remap first or tune first, but once you add stuff like an intake and an exhaust, ideally you have to retune again, and that is another payment. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help you save that little bit of money by not having to retune again. So bolt on everything first, install everything that you can, and leave the tuning for last. Well, that's the initial batch of questions. I think after this we'll be having more. So again, what we do in the shop is intake, exhaust, ECU remapping, basically anything that makes the car go faster. So again, this is Sydney, and I'm the owner of SpeedLab. Check and stay around for our next video then.